in-service trainee teachers, attempting to make sense of an over-elaborate world of teaching and learning, have the added pressure of evidencing this development through a training course. Therefore, the pedagogy used must allow the trainee some time to comprehend all aspects of what is expected of them. My own reflections on this topic rounded my concentration to a point of concern, highlighting just how difficult this construct must be for trainee teachers to handle. Murphy discusses the idea of the learner as the agent and suggests that if the student, in this case trainee, is the one that constructs meaning, then it is up to the learner to develop operative knowledge that allows them to select from their knowledge appropriately in order to solve the problems and dilemmas they face in making sense. My concern is how easily trainees are able to develop this operative knowledge when there are so many other considerations to take into account. Trainees are quite often new to the lifelong learning sector, and many have been out of education for an extended period of time. The institutional pressures imposed by departments, directorates and employing organizations are often overwhelming in terms of the expectations placed upon the trainees. In addition, there is the associated anxiety of a course that holds their future competency and employment on its achievement. Thus an exhausting dichotomy arises which must be negotiated through the development of individual skills, knowledge and attitude to their role. All of this must be taken on board by the trainee in order to gain entry into a specialist community of practice and find their place within that community. With this concept of the specialist community in mind, it is relevant to discuss how trainees first encounter the teacher training environment. To consider where this experience is located within Rogoff's planes of focus, I argue that at first sight it registers for trainees within the community plane, which appropriately in this case Rogoff refers to as apprenticeship. The diploma course is indeed little more than a vocational apprenticeship for teachers. They engage in their often new role and attend the course on a part-time basis, hoping for gaps in their knowledge and practice to be filled. Interpreting Rogoff's description of this plane is of course more complex than merely the link to the trainee as an apprentice. However, it still offers a very clear resolution to me as their tutor within the scope of this study. Firstly, there is the consideration of the specified diploma curriculum that must be outlined, interpreted and explained to the trainee. Within the remit of the curriculum, there is a wealth of concrete and abstract competencies that must eventually be demonstrated by the trainee. This then leads the trainee to require direction on specific policy, social and institutional attitudes and values of which the trainee may at first be unaware or feel are unclear in their specific context. It is the purpose of the course, through the activities that are introduced and undertaken, to support trainees in gaining a greater understanding of these responsibilities. The situation trainees find themselves in during their diploma sessions reflects the acquisition metaphor far more than that of participation in session activities. This is because trainees are able to gain individual enrichment to acquire the necessary facts and skills required to possess the relevant knowledge in order to function and to feel comfortable in receiving this information from the tutor acting as the provider, enabler or facilitator. The concept of facilitator refers to Petty's interpretation of the term, where the teacher moves from purely the provider of information, the grand orator, to a position of support in providing the appropriate environment for learning to take place. This term, however, still refers to the teacher as the focal point of the activity, the one in command of learning transfer. Although this is not a negative standpoint to take, it lessens the agency of the trainee by reducing active engagement in their own development. Therefore, what I consider in terms of teaching, coaching, presenting off from the outset the pedagogic approach I select must offer trainees principles and theories that draw parallels to their own theories of learning, of learners, and of knowledge, and enacting settings to support learning. Otherwise I will not be able to help them to reconcile any gaps that may appear in their development. The trainees must receive this information in order that they are prepared to consider their own development. This approach is a necessary function of the diploma course, or for that matter any course, due to the requirements of our individualistic, acquisitive culture that besets government policy and Ofsted judgments against which we are measured. The remit of this study was to discuss how current practice could be improved through the use of the participation metaphor as a complementary function within the diploma course, with special consideration of the development of the reflective practitioner. In doing so, the perceived weaknesses of the acquisition approach to this area will be compensated for by the complementary elements of the participation metaphor. This will allow the focus of activity to move away from the teacher and begin to bring the interpersonal plane to the foreground above that of the community plane. Larevi states that despite exposure to specific scaffolding intended to develop reflective practice, the reflections of trainee teachers often result in descriptive explanations of what has happened, failing to connect to a theoretical framework or societal issues. Although we provide opportunity for trainees to demonstrate their reflective practice, if the structure we provide is insufficient in enabling trainee agency to develop, the evidence they produce may relate purely to the criteria set rather than their long-term development. Dewey suggested that when reflection does take place, some tutors may not be sufficiently critical and may jump to a conclusion without weighing the grounds on which it rests. He may take the first answer or solution that comes to him. There is no guarantee that the trainee is able to replicate this in practice, nor develop these arguments or reasoning any further than the criteria require. They are aiming to meet the criteria, and therefore the development of their reflective practice may be hindered or tainted by the effects of confounding changes in the environment, meaning that the reflective development they make may not be of worth in other situations, as they are unable to construct links between the environment, the situation, or the problem that requires resolution. Harford and McRourke believe that although most teachers are aware of both the origin and meaning of reflective practice and are conscious of the importance of appearing to engage in reflection, they seldom see its application to their real-life teaching experience. To resolve this issue, I have introduced the community of reflective practice. This community of trainee teachers will be collective of all the experiences from within the group, including my own as expert participant. It will be reciprocal in creating an environment in which all trainees will be able to help each other in sharing ideas, practice, and advice, and in doing so creating both individual and group identities. It will be supportive in using the shared experience, feedback, and constructive development ideas of all trainees, mentors, and tutors. It will be cumulative of all the experiences gathered together and develop confidence in personal identities. Finally, it will be purposeful in developing a future history of reflective practice that each of the trainees will be able to continue throughout their career.